This is Sports 225 with Lee Feinswag.
Lee Feinswag, look at the kiss.
Sports 225 is brought to you by Brett. Remember, it all starts at Brett. Now, your host, Lee Feinswag.
Well, good evening. You should know that 40 years ago this week, the greatest movie in the history of the world was released, Blazing Saddles. And in honor of Blazing Saddles, my first guest, Kenny Henderson, who had nothing to do with Blazing Saddles, must relate to one of the greatest lines in that movie, a movie filled with the greatest lines. What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here? And LHSAA Executive Commissioner, Executive Director. See, I asked him about that before, and it's not a commissioner, he's a director, Executive Director. I said, there must be times when you go, what in the world have I gotten myself into?
Every now and then, yeah. It gets, it's never a dull moment. It's always different every day.
Kenny oversees all of the high school sports activities in the state of Louisiana, in a state in which high school sports is more important than many other sports. You know, the joke is, we may be last in roads and schools, but don't mess with us in athletics. And it really is a serious big business, isn't it?
It is, and it seems to be growing, which is sometimes a little bit worrisome that we're getting things out of proportion, putting a little bit more emphasis on some things that maybe we ought not to be putting so much emphasis on. I think sometimes we lose the fun of playing sports, and that's what sports should be all about, is having fun.
Well, unfortunately, in your job, a lot of the things that you deal with, you don't get to deal with the joys of the victory, the satisfaction of coaching. I mean, all the things that took you through athletics before you got to this job. You have to deal with putting out fires.
Yeah, our job, we're more of a regulatory association than anything else. I mean, we're a service organization, but everybody knows us because of the rules and regulations. Mm-hmm. And it's our job to enforce those rules. I would like to say, to make sure everybody understands, we don't make the rules. The principals make the rules. Right. We enforce the rules.
Yeah, no, that's a really big thing. I mean, a lot of times his opinion doesn't matter. Although, I mean, hopefully you're able to put it forth in different ways. Now, I got to know Kenny when he first got the job. I want to say late 2007, early 2008, something like that.
I came down to Baton Rouge in January of 2007. I actually took over as the director in October of 2007.
Yeah, and a few things have happened since then.
Yeah.
There's so many changes, but the biggest one, and Kenny's been kind enough to come on. He came on the old Sports Monday, and of course Sports 225, and every once in a while it's great for him to come on and we catch up about a few things. You'd be crazy not to just lead with the public-private, because I don't think that you've been on the show and we've actually visited much about that since then. It was brewing for many, many years. I mean, I can remember 20, 25 years ago, complaints about it.
I think it first started in the late 90s, 96, 97 is the first time that actually came up, and there was a push to separate the two groups. And then it came back up in around 2003, because that's when I was put in charge of a committee to help oversee this and study it.
And you were in North Louisiana at the time.
I was the principal of Ruston High School at that time, yes. And so, and now it's come up again. It cycles all the time.
Does the whole issue pain you, or do you just roll with it and deal with it?
This one's a little differently because it was proposed differently. In the 1996 and the 2003, it called for a complete split of the organizations, where the private schools would go one direction and the public schools would go another direction.
Now you're talking about all sports and not play each other.
All sports, all the way, total split.
Wow.
And then this year it was posed a little bit differently in the fact that we're only talking about the playoffs. So during the regular season,
and the football playoffs,
and it affected football only.
Right.
Actually, the first proposal was for all sports, and then it got pared down by another principal to just be for football, and that's what passed.
And so it did. So they went from 5 state championships to 9, 5 public, 4 private.
Yes.
Now, I was thinking to myself, all right, if this is going to happen, you're going to go maybe 4 and 2. That was what I thought would be an applicable number. The privates wouldn't like that. I was thinking 4 public, 2 private. I could maybe live with 3. 9 just seemed like it was diluted. And I don't imagine you would disagree with me.
9 is, I think everybody can pretty much agree, 9's too many.
Right.
To change the whole system is not an easy thing to do, and it's got to be voted on in January. Yes, probably four. If we stay in this situation like we are, 4 in the public schools, and maybe 3 in the non-public schools would be, or the select schools would be a better number. But how you treat 2 groups under the same umbrella a little bit differently, that's the tough question.
Right. Kenny Henderson is the executive director of the LHSAA. He's with me later on in the show. Hunt Palmer and Jordy Collado will be talking some prep hoops, and then we'll look at the National Signing Day with Shea Dixon from 24/7. But the first half of the show is Kenny and me. And among the things that were kind of screwy was that teams with not even close to winning records got into the playoffs. And what I wanted to ask was the way you did it in volleyball was when they redid volleyball a few years ago, and you threw out the classifications, if you will. There's still classification championships, but you took all the teams, put them 1 through whatever, and then broke them into brackets of whether it was 32, 48 to make it fill in. Why wasn't that logic applied to football to keep that other problem from happening?
Mainly because football is played in classifications and not divisions. Volleyball stands alone. So whatever we decide to do with volleyball, or the principals decide to do with volleyball, it only affects volleyball. Football is the basis for all classification in the state of Louisiana. So that's the first thing we have to do, and then we fill in everything around it. If football were in divisions, then you could make decisions that would affect football only. But if you start making decisions on football right now, the way the rules are read, rules are written, that would also affect basketball, baseball, softball. Everything is affected.
Which you don't want to do.
Yeah.
I mean, was it a victory for the LHSAA when the split involved only the football playoffs and not all the other sports? And I ask that from the sense that it seemed like it's better for the kids to be able to play each other in all sports.
Yeah. Victory, I'm not sure that would be the word I would use, but you know, from a logistics standpoint, it was easier to deal with just football than it would have been to try to deal with basketball, baseball, softball, all the other sports.
Yeah.
And so from that standpoint, yes, I guess it's good that we delved into it from a football standpoint first.
So a couple of weeks ago, weather permitting, you finally had your meetings. If I recall, you were affected greatly by the storms that came through Baton Rouge and got delayed. Even the Hall of Fame was delayed a day. And the issue was revisited and voted upon. Did you go into that meeting thinking, okay, maybe there'll be some changes and we'll maybe go from that 9 to 7, or did you think it would be the status quo that it ended up being?
Well, you can't touch, like I said, unless you rewrite the rules, you can't touch the public schools. And so the whole issue was, were we going to be allowed to let certain groups come back and play together, which would have reduced the number of games. Going in, there was a thought that maybe in the 4 and 5A that they might agree to come back together for the simple reason there's so few select schools in that group. There's only 8 select schools in the 5A that would be classified as a 5A school.
I didn't realize
And there's
that.
only 4 select schools that would be classified as a 4A group. So 12 schools total is what you're talking about. So there was some thought that maybe the 4 and 5A might get back together, but that didn't happen either.
And then you were able to quote Blazing Saddles and say, what in the wide, wide world of sports
That's right.
is going on here?
That's right.
We got to take a break. When we get back, we won't talk about the public-private split for now, because we would just be like beating our heads against the wall, wouldn't we?
That's correct.
That's it. Kenny Henderson is the executive director of the LHSAA. I'm Lee Feinspog at Sports 225, and we'll be right back.